Hi, this is Tony Ulwick. Welcome to this overview of jobs to be done theory and outcome-driven innovation. The first time I applied this process was back in 1991, helping Cordis Corporation grow in the highly competitive angioplasty balloon market. By using this approach, we were able to better position their current products, which led to an increase in market share. We were able to improve their existing products, which led to a greater increase in market share. And we were also able to find gaps in the product portfolio, which led to the fastest growing device in the medical history, which was the stent. This, of course, propelled the growth of Cordis Corporation, which was eventually purchased by Johnson & Johnson. And the reason I love this story is because we were able to duplicate this many times over the years. We've completed over 1,000 growth strategy engagements with our clients in over 30 different industries. We introduced this concept of outcome-driven innovation to Clay Christensen back in 1999, and he talked about it in his book, The Innovative Solution, in 2003. Since that time, he said, innovation becomes much more predictable and far more profitable when it begins with a deep understanding of the job the customer is trying to get done. He went on to say that innovation can be 100% predictable. Well, we're not quite there yet, but our success rate is about 5 times the industry average at 86%. And the story I want to tell you is, how is that possible? How have we taken a process that seems random on the surface and turned it into something that's far more predictable? In this overview, we'll talk about the importance of infusing an innovation mindset that changes the way you think about innovation and allows you to lead at innovation. We'll talk about the importance of establishing a common language for innovation and what that language is. The importance of aligning your team around a shared understanding of customer needs. We'll also talk about how ODI removes guesswork, obstacles, and inefficiency from the innovation process. And most importantly, have you think about how ODI thinking can be applied to overcome your growth and innovation challenges. So let's begin with the definition of innovation. We call innovation the process of devising solutions that address unmet customer needs. On the surface, this sounds like it's a fairly straightforward process. There's just 2 inputs. One is needs, one is ideas, which means we can approach the process in one of 2 ways. One is called the ideas first approach, which is inherently flawed. And this consists of asking customers for the solutions they want, or beginning the process by brainstorming ideas and iterating and pivoting and failing fast. This approach is flawed because each time you come up with an idea and test it in the market, you're learning more about the customer's needs. And then you come back and refine the idea, learn more about customers' needs, and so on. It's a very slow and inefficient way to learn about the customer's needs. So rather than doing it this way, it makes far more sense to apply what we call the needs-first approach. Now, this isn't anything new. This is really marketing 101 logic. But unfortunately, it's very difficult to execute. The goal here, of course, is to figure out in advance what are the customer's needs, which are unmet, are the segments of people with different unmet needs, and then come up with the solutions that address them. And we want to be able to test those solutions in advance of product development to know that they are going to win in the marketplace. The reason this becomes difficult is because in most companies there isn't agreement on what a customer need even is. So even though you have the sales and marketing and development R&D teams all motivated to create customer value, if they can't agree on what a need is, certainly they can't agree on what the needs are and how to deliver value to the customer. There also isn't agreement on whether or not customers can articulate their needs or what inputs make innovation predictable. In fact, all these terms are often used as inputs into the innovation process, as if any input will lead to success. Well, as we know from any process, random inputs lead to random success. So the inputs into the innovation process need to be specified as well. So what should a need look like? So this is a question we asked ourselves years ago. What's the specifications of a good customer needs statement? Well, clearly, they have to be knowable by the customer and discoverable by the company. They have to be valid. They have to be solution independent, unambiguous, measurable. And most importantly, they have to inform the team how to create customer value. So they have to apply to sales, marketing, development, and R&D. There's one other factor that's absolutely critical. Back in my IBM days, we worked on a project called the PC Junior, which was a big failure. And it's not as if we didn't talk to customers about what they wanted. We did. But a year later, or a year and a half later, when we introduced the product, it was no longer what they wanted. So one of the big specifications that we've placed on customer needs is that they have to be stable over time. You can't have a moving target. And this posed a difficult problem to solve. How can we define needs in such a way that addresses all these specifications and makes them stable over time? And this is the value of jobs to be done theory. By focusing on the underlying process the customer is trying to execute rather than the product, this opens the door to capturing a new type of customer input, an input we call the customer's desired outcomes. They are the metrics that people use to measure success when getting the job done. And because the job is stable over time, it makes it possible to capture needs that are stable over time as well. And this is what fuels the predictability of the innovation process. So think about jobs to be done theory as a new lens. Yes, people buy products and services to get a job done. So what we're going to do is we're going to make the job the unit of analysis, not the product, which means we're going to see everything through the lens of the hole maker, not the drill maker. So as we define markets and needs and opportunities and segments, we're going to define them differently. And that's all the fundamental part of the outcome-driven innovation process. The first step in the ODI process is to define a market. But we're not going to define a market as a product or a technology. We're going to define the market as a group of people plus the job they're trying to get done. Next, we're going to define the customer's needs. But we're not going to define needs as exciters, delighters, pains, gains, latent needs, or any of the other statements that you saw earlier. We're going to define them very specifically as the metrics that people use to measure success when getting a job done. Next, we're going to look for opportunities. And we're going to define opportunities as outcomes that are underserved, where people might be willing to pay more to get the job done better, and outcomes that are overserved, where people may be willing to pay less for lower performance. Because when you innovate, you can help customers get the job done better and more cheaply, and you want to find the inputs that will help you achieve both of those objectives. Next, we want to segment the market into groups of people with different unmet needs. And the way to do that isn't to segment around demographics or psychographics, it's to segment around unmet needs. Now, most companies can't do that because they don't agree on what a need is or what the needs are or which are unmet. But we've taken care of that in these 3 previous steps. So now we know the market, we know the needs, we know which are underserved and overserved, and segments of people with different unmet needs, which allows us to put together a very powerful strategy. Just like in the Quartus example, we're able to answer many key questions with this set of inputs. As it turns out, much of the organization is dependent on a solid understanding of customer needs in order to create customer value. So with these inputs, we're able to answer the questions on the right. How should you best position your products? How should you improve them? Are there gaps in the portfolio? Those are the 3 of the questions we answered for the Quartus example. Also, what strategy should we pursue? Disruptive, differentiated? Are there scalable opportunities? How big are they? Will people pay more for them? Are there products in the pipeline we shouldn't be building? Should we be making R&D and M&A investments in specific areas? What adjacent market opportunities exist? And finally, how do we deploy new technologies like digitalization, AI, machine learning to create more value for our customers? Once we know what the customer's unmet needs are, we're able to answer many of these questions. So let's go through each step in the ODI process, the first being defining the market. Again, we're going to define a market as a group of people plus the job they're trying to get done, not a technology. Technologies come and go, while the underlying job remains the same over time. Music enthusiasts listening to music, the interventional cardiologist trying to restore blood flow in an artery. Notice how we define these jobs. They're the underlying process the person is trying to execute. The cybersecurity manager trying to protect a website from cyber threats. And the reason we're defining it as a process is so we can break down that process into its component parts and understand how people measure success along each step of the way. Now, defining these jobs is not always easy. course, it's very critical to get it right. And one of the mistakes that is often made is that people ask, what job does my product do? Now, if you follow that logic, you could be the kettle maker over here on the left and go to your customers and say, what job does my product do? And they'd say, well, it heats water. And it does. And you could go back and create a device that heats water to the perfect temperature and maintains it there as long as desired. But you could still lose out to a competitor who's getting the entire job done. So the thought here is, instead of asking, what job does my product do? We want to ask, what job is the customer trying to get done? What we've seen is that most products only get part of a job done, and customers want to get the entire job done on a single platform. Another interesting fact here is that companies often confuse how many markets they're in. If you have 20 or 30 different products, you may think you're in 20 or 30 different markets. The truth is, many of those products may be serving the same core market. And understanding your markets through a jobs to be done lens can really simplify the complexity of your market space. So one of the things we recommend to all of you is to start your journey with jobs to be done by defining the markets that you're already in through this lens. Once that's done, we can begin to understand the customer's needs. This starts by understanding the job at a greater degree. We use what we call job mapping. So what we've learned again is that offerings naturally evolve over time to get the entire job done, and knowing what that entire job is establishes this long-term vision and accelerates progress towards that goal. So a job map looks something like this. This is the universal job map that we published in HBR back in 2008. And we noticed over the years that most jobs have similar steps. There's a planning step. There's a gather the input step, organize the inputs, confirm, execute the job itself, monitor the output, make modifications, and then conclude. And we create these job maps for a couple of reasons. One is it helps us organize our outcome gathering activities, which we'll discuss later, but it really points out the broader vision. Your goal over time is to help customers get the entire job done on a single platform. And if you know what the entire job is, you can get there more quickly than a competitor who's just stumbling along the way. So the thought is, let's look at the entire job, look for technologies like the MP3 that comes along and gets the job to be done significantly better and gets adopted for use, or streaming services that come along and get the job done significantly better and get adopted for use. Job mapping informs along many fronts. So once you have that job map in place, you can ask questions like this. Do our products get the entire job done or only parts of it? Are there holes in the product portfolio? Are customers cobbling together solutions to get the entire job done? And is there a product in the portfolio that holds the potential to be that platform level solution? You can ask the same kind of questions about your competitors, traditional and non-traditional. What parts of the job are they getting done? And how are they going to eventually get the entire job done on a single platform? From a process standpoint, you can look at how the job is currently being executed. What order? Is it inefficient? Can you help customers get the job done in a more efficient manner so that they're planning before they're gathering, so that they're confirming before they're executing? And then, of course, from a marketing standpoint, you can better position the products you already have so that your messaging connects more solidly with customers. Once you've created the job map, we go to the next level, which is to understand all the customer's desired outcomes. And I like thinking about this as a hierarchy, like you're putting a puzzle together, if you will. We know what the core job is. We know what the job steps are. Now we figure out what are all the outcomes. Let's go back to our specifications of a needs statement. We say from the job executor standpoint, they have to be knowable. We have to be able to discover them. They have to describe all forms of improvement, how to get the job done better, meaning faster, more predictably, higher output, throughput. They also have to be solution independent. We can't be going to customers to understand their needs and they offer up solutions. We're also going to use this set of inputs in a survey to quantify where the opportunities are, which means these statements have to be unambiguous. We can't have half the population interpreting them one way and half another way. We look for very consistent language and structure in these statements so we're not introducing variability into the process simply by the way we're structuring the inputs. And from a products team standpoint, they have to be actionable across the organization, stable over time, measurable, controllable, and predictive of success. And this is why we define customer needs in this manner. We say needs are the 100+ metrics that customers use to measure success when executing the job to be done. And again, we call these statements the customer's desired outcomes. And they look like this. They have a direction of improvement, a metric that can be measured and controlled in the design of the product, the object of control, which is what the customer is trying to achieve, and contextual clarifier to bring context to the statement itself. Now, we've gone through many tests of this statement to see what kind of inputs produce the best result. In fact, we worked with Microsoft back in the early 2000s on over 40 different projects. And in that effort, we would test different variations of this statement using different words to start it, for example, reduce, decrease, eliminate, prevent. And what we learned was very important. Just changing a single word or structure of the statement can impact the way people rate them for importance and satisfaction. So it's very important to keep the statements in the format that we've described here because we've proven that innovation can be predictable if you use statements that look like this. We've also learned that there are over 100 different statements that people use to measure success when getting a typical job done. So it's not as if customers have 5 or 10 needs. They have 100 or more needs. And what we're trying to do is to figure out what all those needs are so we can determine which are overserved and which are underserved. So what we've described so far is that core job that the customer is trying to get done. But there are other inputs that we consider as part of this process. One is what we call related jobs. We know that as people try to get the core job done, they may want to get other jobs done as well. And if you can create a product that gets multiple jobs done on a single platform, your product's going to be more valuable than a product that doesn't. So knowing what those jobs are and knowing which ones are underserved will give you insight into how you should architect your product platform to get multiple jobs done in the future. There's also emotional jobs. People want to be perceived a certain way as a result of getting a job done. They want to feel a certain way. We want to know what those emotional jobs are so we can use them to better connect emotion and function in our value propositions. And we can appeal to customer emotion in our content and ads and so on. There's also what we call consumption chain jobs. People have to receive products, set them up, learn how to use them, transport them, clean them, store them, maintain them. Now, people aren't buying products for these reasons, but this is all part of the product life cycle or the customer journey. So knowing where people are struggling along the journey are also very helpful inputs into the innovation process. And lastly, the financial outcomes of the buyer. In many markets, the buyer and the job executor are different people. So and even if they're the same people, they're wearing two different hats. The buyer has the financial hat on, and they're looking at outcomes through a cost lens, whereas the job executor is looking at the outcomes through a functional lens. These are all the ingredients that come into play, and we put them into the jobs to be done needs framework. It reveals the types of inputs that lead to predictable innovation and where to go to capture those, whether it be the job executor, people on the product lifecycle support team, or the purchase decision maker. Next, we're looking for opportunities. So here again, we're looking to know with statistical certainty which outcomes should be the focus of value creation and which should be the focus of cost reduction. So we're going to define an opportunity as an unmet need. So this is a desired outcome that's either underserved or overserved. Now, the way we discover these opportunities is through quantitative research. We take those 100+ statements, put them in a survey, and put that survey out in front of anywhere from 180 to 1,000+ people who are a representative sample of our customer base. And what we ask them to do is to tell us the importance of each outcome and the satisfaction of each outcome given the solution that they're using today. And we capture what solution they're using as well, so we know satisfaction levels for competing products. What we're able to do with this information is lay this out on an opportunity landscape, which helps us identify where to focus for value creation. So this one dot here, for example, this one outcome plotted over here, is in that position because 81% of the population is telling us that that's a very or extremely important outcome, yet only 30% are telling us it's very or extremely satisfied. So what we're saying here is if an outcome is very important but not very satisfied, that it's unmet and it's an opportunity for value creation. So what we do next is we plot all these statements on the landscape. And what we're very quickly and easily able to see is where the market's underserved and where people are willing to pay more to get the job done better, and where the market's overserved, where they'd be willing to give up performance for lower price. We're also able to determine the table stakes. These are very important outcomes that are very satisfied, that you don't want to negatively impact with any iteration of your product. The next part of the process is segmentation. We know what the unmet needs are, but now we want to figure out other segments of people with different unmet needs. And what we've learned over time is that not all customers are alike. People don't agree on which outcomes are underserved and overserved. And this is true because people struggle in different ways when executing the job to be done. And to discover these segments of people with different unmet needs, we do not use demographic, psychographic, or attitudinal segmentation classifications because they fail to reveal what those unmet needs and segments look like. Instead, we're going to define a market segment as a group of executors who have a unique set of under or overserved outcomes which result from the situation or circumstances, and we're going to discover that set of segments by segmenting around the unmet needs. So for example, a third of your population may think that outcomes 10, 20, and 30 are really important and unsatisfied. And another third may think that outcomes 40, 50, and 60 are really important and unsatisfied. Now, those groups of people are going to be placed in different segments. And the way we do that statistically is to look at the variables that people disagree on, outcomes 10, 20, and 30, and so on, and run cluster analysis and place people into groups of segments. It could be 2, 3, 4, or more. And once they're in those segments, we can profile them. And this, of course, is very critical because we're trying to figure out what's causing respondents in one segment to struggle more or differently than others. And this leads to the creation of statistically valid personas or segment descriptions. Now, they're not personas as you might traditionally think about them as demographics and psychographics, but they're needs-based personas. Here's a typical example of what can happen before and after segmentation. This comes from a study that we did with dentists who were filling a cavity. What you're looking at here are 270 dentists and the final results of their important satisfaction ratings. And what it looks like is the market is very appropriately served. There's very little that's underserved or overserved. Now, this can be very misleading. And we see this in many markets because theoretically, half the market could be highly overserved and the other half could be highly underserved. But when you combine it all together and average it, it looks like the market's appropriately served. And this, of course, would lead you to a very, very different conclusion. After you segment the market into 3 segments, it may look very different, as it did in this dental case. And what we learned here is that 19% of the market, as you can see on the far left, was overserved. And this consists of patients that dentists had that had healthy gums and required just a small filling. Over on the right, you see a segment that's highly underserved. And this consists of people that were highly underserved because they were working with patients that had unhealthy gums and required a large filling. And under that circumstance, patients tend to bleed more, which causes visualization issues. It makes it harder to keep the area dry, and it makes it harder to contour that larger filling. So you can see here that differences in situation cause customers to have different unmet needs. And the way to discover this is to segment around the unmet needs. This leads to the final step, which is to build the strategy. What we've done so far is we've determined who the customer is, what their needs are, which are unmet, and if there's segments of people with different unmet needs. So now we can answer many of those key questions that we talked about earlier. As we do this, we first start by figuring out what type of strategy should be pursued for each segment we want to target. And for this, we rely on what we have defined as the jobs to be done growth strategy matrix. We've learned that people buy products and services to get a job done better and or more cheaply, which suggests that there's really a finite number of strategies that could be used, and the opportunities that exist in the market dictate what strategy we should pursue. For example, a differentiated strategy can only be used if there's a set of people who are underserved. A disruptive strategy would only be effective if there's an overserved segment of customers. So as we apply that thinking to our innovation strategy, it looks like as follows. We call an innovation strategy the selection of the opportunities, the segments and outcomes that we want to target with new and existing products. So let me give you an example. Let's go back to the dental example. And here, let's put our strategy together. For example, let's go after that segment in the middle that's 57% of the market with a sustaining strategy. And we're going to improve our current products along those 10 or so different dimensions that you see over there on the right. We know how big the opportunity is. We know precisely what outcomes to go after. And if we successfully address those underserved outcomes, we'll be creating value for 57% of the population. Next, we want to pursue a disruptive strategy for this 19% of the market. Here, we want to take our current product and cost reduce it along these dimensions that are most overserved so that people will give up performance in areas that are less meaningful, and they'll be able to get the job done equally as well, but more cheaply. Next, let's pursue a differentiated strategy on this third segment on the far right. This is where dentists get most of their headaches from, with people that take much more time than planned and can really mess up the day in their schedule. And here we're targeting this group of 24% of the market. We know exactly what outcomes to go after, and more importantly, we know the reason why they're underserved. Now, this is the kind of thinking that goes into all the innovation strategies, and every market that we analyze looks very different. So I'm just showing a few examples here of real projects that we've worked on and some of the findings and some of the strategies that we've pursued as a result. I want to introduce the Bosch case study. Here, the Bosch team wanted to create a premium brand circular saw that would allow them to enter the North American market successfully and compete against Walter Makita and gain shelf space in big box retailers like Home Depot and Lowe's. Now, what they wanted to do is to create a product that got the job done better, but at a similar price point. Now, what we told them is that the only way you can do that is if there is an underserved segment. So as we did our analysis, we found out that while much of the market was overserved, there was a segment of the market, which was 33%, that were underserved. These were tradesmen that generally had to make lengthier cuts, more angle cuts, so they had to make more blade height and angle adjustments. So this became their innovation strategy, to target this segment and this set of outcomes to help them achieve their goals. And they did. So this is really the punchline for the whole presentation. What are the chances that the Bosch team, your team, any team, would randomly come up with a solution that addresses 14 unmet needs in a segment if they didn't know the segment existed and they didn't know those 14 unmet needs were underserved? And of course, the chances are near zero. And this is why ODI is so effective, because it's taking the time to define the problem at such a granular level that it brings to light exactly what you have to focus on in order to create value for customers. So as Bosch was presented with those 14 unmet needs, they were quickly able to go to work to create a winning growth strategy by putting together a series of features that they could incorporate on their CS20 circular saw. One of those features, the bevel stop feature, which tied directly to one outcome that was underserved, which was to minimize the time it takes to make blade angle adjustments. By putting in this detent system, they were able to reduce the time by about 80%. So this is the kind of thinking that goes into creating a breakthrough product. One of the interesting points here too, once they saw those 14 unmet needs, they asked, so which needs should we target? And the reply was, you should target all 14 and hope that by addressing all of them effectively, that you're creating enough value so that customers will switch from other brands like DeWalt and Makita. Well, needless to say, they were very successful at this. They put a whole series of features together, became their best-selling circular saw in the North American market for about 10 years. Another example of creating a growth strategy, especially from a marketing standpoint, was with this Arm & Hammer animal nutrition example. By remessaging the way they sold their products and targeting the dairy herdsman as opposed to the nutritionist, they were able to generate a 30% plus year-to-year revenue gain. Another interesting example is something that happened recently where the medicines company was acquired at a 41% premium after applying ODI at scale for years. So we helped them really go through each of their product lines over the last 6 years or so. And as Clive Meanwell says here, it drove our innovation, our technology selection, our development priorities, manufacturing strategies, and commercial planning. So you can see the impact that it has at a product level and when it's applied at scale. I did want to talk briefly about how this is deployed in an organization. So the first step is to scope out a project and to figure out who is the job executor you want to target and define the project plan. The next step is to go through a customer immersion. Generally, we work with a group of customers and the client, but the important thing is customers are in the room together, generally for anywhere from 4 to 8 hours over a day or a couple of days, to really hash out what the job is, what the job map looks like, and a complete set of outcomes. And then we'll take those outcomes and validate them with other people external to that session, often all around the world, so we get a set of needs that are validated worldwide. With that set of needs in hand, then we quantify those inputs. So we put together a sample plan, our survey, and get that survey out into the field to begin collecting the quantitative data so we can run the analyses. The analyses help us discover those opportunities. So we build our data model, run our segmentation analysis, the competitive analysis, and so on, and figure out exactly what segments to target with what products and what outcomes we want to target for both value creation and cost reduction. And then, of course, put together the actual growth strategy that says, here's what marketing has to do in order to better position its existing products. And here's what the product team has to do to improve its existing products. And here's where R&D has to invest in order to create the stent of the future. So these are all the insights that go into building out that growth strategy and how it rolls out. It can be done in different levels of fidelity as well, is the way that we like to talk about it. We've worked with many clients on occasions for like a 3-day workshop where we take them through all aspects of the process, but with less fidelity. So for example, we may include a customer immersion session with customers in the room for a day or so, but we may not have the quantitative survey go out to anyone outside the room. So it may just be a very limited view of the quantification, which would impede segmentation and so on. But it does give people great insight into how the process works and some good general direction. If you want to turn up the fidelity a bit, we have more like a sprint format where the goal is to do the customer immersion, capture the outcomes, and then put them in a survey that goes out to a group of people, come back and do the analysis, and so on. A sprint can generally be done if you focus on just one type of customer, like the job executor, not the job executor, the buyer, and people on the product lifecycle support team. And if you can focus on just one and keep from having to do translations of your survey and so on, you can get great results in a very short period of time. And then, of course, there's full-scale projects that incorporate everything from job executors to the consumption job elements to the buyer and so on. So these were the objectives of the overview. One is to infuse that different mindset so you can see innovation through a jobs to be done lens and define markets, needs, segments very differently. Establishing that common language for innovation is critical as you try to get marketing and development, R&D and sales to align their views around the shared understanding of customer needs. Also through this, I hope that we were able to explain how we remove the guesswork and obstacles and inefficiencies from the innovation process. And most importantly, hopefully this triggered some new thinking as to how you could apply these concepts to improve your situation. So I want to finish up here with ways to follow up and get started. Feel free to email us at info@strategy.com or call us. Also, you can get a free download of the audiobook or an ebook at jobstobedonebook.com, or you could enroll in our online courses at my.strategy.com. So I want to thank you for taking the time today to listen and wish you success at becoming outcome driven. Thank you.